As Top Secret sat in her 9 zillionth home, away from home, she sighed and smiled into her cup of tea, the simpleness of her last mission's solution to the problem whirling through her mind, whirling like a tempest in a teacup. Reaching for her beloved kitty cat, Perfect, her hip phone started to vibrate. There was a problem. Passiona bounced up, disrupting Perfect rather unceremoniously as she cursed and dashed about getting into her nighttime stealth gear. As she jumped into her craft, she punched the vertical button and soared up, now on her way to the west coast of Vancouver Island. On the other side of the continent, and a bit further down the globe, Quester was in his element. As she silently, yet astonishingly zipped through the air, she had a sudden niggling sensation and thought, oh, whoa. Sure enough, the console started to crackle with static. Top Secret, this is... Passiona quickly installed the scramble device. Ostino, I'm reading you at a rate that can't be. Are you there? Is this some kind of a joke? Why, no, it is not, my darling. I have just recently perfected my little toy. Ostino was stunned, but not wanting to let on, replied, Ah, yes, the device Rascal and I had wondered about. Where are you headed? Passiona started to receive a live feed on her computer. It stated, Top Secret, location halt, new vacation, you are needed in Zurich, Ostino to join. Head there at once, we'll discuss further upon arrival. Passiona silently cursed and thought so much for my undetectable channel. She knew without a doubt what this was about, the billions of missing gold bullion. The infamous Tsarist eagle was stamped on the bar of gold that was mysteriously left on the doorstep just this morning. Imagine a whole bar of gold just left there, with no note, nothing. The Tsarist eagle was key in identifying the origin of it. There were a few other details that were now falling into place. Passiona shook her head to clear it and exhaled a giant breath. With steely resolve, she squared her shoulders and settled in for the fairly long flight.
As Passiona walked up to the hotel, she kept her instincts on high. She had hidden the vessel on the edge of a field. With its new camo design, it blended in perfectly with the surrounding countryside. She checked in as a reporter in town to do a story on the townspeople and to photograph the area, and then climbed the stairs. When she got to her room, she sank down onto the feather-filled mattress. As she was checking her weapons, there was a tapping on the door that was done in a rhythm that was the code for Ostino. As she opened the door, bwamo, she went careening backwards. Rather than stumbling, she went into a backward somersault. When she came up, she pulled her ankle revolver and took aim and fired. The masked perpetrator went sailing backwards. As she was falling, Passiona lunged for her to stop the noise, for she was going to hit a glass table, and caught the masked gunwoman. She let her down to the floor with a soft thud. Thank God the center had made all their weapons silent. She reached for the mask and pulled it free. No! No! Cried Passiona. Quickly, she got the cleanup crew online and told them to get here and to send a medic with them. They thought they were going to be bringing in a prisoner with valuable information. They wouldn't find out until quite some time later that the assailant was actually Passiona's long-lost half-sister. Passiona had searched high and low, and with the help of the center's resources, she was sure she would find her. But nothing had turned up until now. Now it made some sense to her because, of course, that's how she avoided being found. The cleanup crew arrived, and with Passiona's instructions to be gentle, and she meant it, they were off. She quickly got her makeup on and dressed. As she went down the stairs, she noticed the bogey, but his attention quickly went back to his paper. Yeah, right. She strode out somewhat awkwardly as the older folk walk, her wrinkles and the bags under her eyes, along with the varicose veins sewed into her nylons, all made for a great disguise. The hotel had many elderly people booked in. She hailed a cabbie. It was a great disguise for getting a cab, that's for sure. As they started off, she asked the cabbie to just drive. After they had rounded the first bend, she spoke up and said, I'll pay you €150 to lose the tail we have. He said, You Americans are so much fun. The cabbie was no stranger to driving like a madman, so they careened around corners and finally pulled over and backed into a spot between a barn and a load of hay. They waited. After a half hour passed, she said, Okay, thank you. Now I need to get to the chateau. Is it around here? The guidebook I have says it's here somewhere, but that's kind of vague. Lady, said the driver, sit back and enjoy the view. This ride is on me. I have not had this much fun in years.
They were off. She had to gain entry to the hotel administrator's office. Intel from the center had reported there was valuable information that would help lead to the gold, and also a pleasant surprise to Hitler's infamous Amber Room. "So," said Ostino, "perhaps the director wishes to fund and enlarge his evil empire with Hitler's gold. Perhaps some of it being buried beneath the palace garden reflection that you spied on his teacup." Meanwhile, Bronto watches as some of the butterflies depart Nihao, a minute later flying just south of Waikiki and past Diamond Head. As Passiona arrived at the chateau, she handsomely paid the cabbie and proceeded to the hotel lobby. Graceful chandeliers hung down, sending a glimmering of sparkles over the entranceway. My, me," she exclaimed, "this is more like it." She informed the front desk clerk that she was here on a vacation job to shoot the picturesque scenery of the surrounding areas, and that someone else was arriving. She was just finishing signing the register and was instructing the bellboys which luggage to carry. And in walks none other than Questa. She went off to her room and in a flash had the bellboy tipped and on his way. She quickly started to apply the facial mask and blue varicose vein nylons to add to her disguise when there came a knock on the door and Ostino's voice saying, "Hello in there." She quickly put on her blouse and skirt, went to the door and saw through the peephole that it was indeed Ostino. Letting him in, he swept her off of her feet in a smooch and a twirl. "How I've missed you, Passiona." They began talking over their plans after a short interlude. The info said that some of the gold bullion was stashed under the well-known and beautiful gardens in Versailles, France. After they discussed their plans, they thought it best to get a move on. Ostino was to go ahead, while Passiona was to stick to her original plans, and afterwards she was to meet Ostino at a predetermined spot in Versailles. Ostino said goodbye, and off he went.
Finishing off her makeup as an old lady, Passiona then weaponed up and strode out of the door. As she went down the elevator, her thoughts were whirling around. The facts that Ostino had told her were extremely disturbing. They had to find the gold before their opponents did. She stopped the elevator on the second floor, needing a distraction. Gaining entry to a room, she quietly shut the door behind her. She fiddled with the phone, putting on a redirector so the call she was going to make would come up on the lobby phone's call display as if it were made from her room phone. She hysterically told them she had been attacked by a masked man in black, and that he had climbed out of her window, and that he was still in sight. As the front desk clerk ran to get his manager, Passiona slipped into the office behind the front counter. She quickly and thoroughly checked the area for the information. Shit, someone was coming. She crouched and waited. She whipped around and silenced the clerk with a quick tap to the larynx and a skull tap too, just for good luck, and began searching again, starting to get frantic when, "Hey, what's that?" An object was sticking out. As she grabbed it and noted that it was a disc, she put it into the computer. Scanning through the files, she found what she was after. She came out from behind and resumed heading towards the door, slowly and just a tad awkwardly. Someone was starting to shout, and not wanting to explain, she split, then dug in her bag, finding her vessel's whistle. She blew into it 4 times and waited. The first sign was the slight warm breeze. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, her ship arrived. She went to the side of the ship, opened a panel, and let it identify herself via her DNA. A door opened, with steps folding out and down. She ran in and punched the close button and took the navigator's seat. In a few moments, she had her coordinates typed in, and off she flew, silently, invisibly, heading to Versailles to meet up with Ostino. Passiona was now with Ostino and a few newbies. As they sat waiting for the head cheese to arrive, she was checking out the new agents, fresh out of training. Out of the pot and into the fire was just not needed. There was a lady and her sidekick Honcho. Then there was Dwayne, who supposedly had a picture-perfect memory and could fix anything he touched. That left Courtney, fresh-faced, eager, and a kick-ass fighter. There seemed to be something not so right about some of these people.
Everybody snapped to attention as the full colonel strode into the room. Greetings to you all. For you newcomers, I am, as you most likely already know, the colonel. Okay, let's get started. We have some intel that puts $6 billion worth of gold bullion here, reputedly the same gold that Hitler and his cronies stole and stashed at the end of the occupation of France, in one of the worst possible places, I might add, underneath the garden in Versailles. The problem being, folks, is that back when Hitler had his officers bury the gold, this garden was not yet fully established. So we have some handheld burrowing equipment and, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to tunnel under. This will require, of course, a nighttime op, and we will have on site our newest vessel in the entire fleet. This beauty, which I am proud to tell you,
was designed and built by our own agent, Pasiona. It has a skin that blends in with any and all surroundings, rendering it invisible. It also has, underneath that skin, a second layer that is composed of millions of nanobots, filled with a mixture of spider silicone polymer which, upon being struck or breached, immediately starts to fill in the hole. It all happens in seconds. This is what you will be going into and out of the site with. Ostino, it is your job to lead this team. All of you in this room will follow Ostino's orders to a T, or you will face instant termination. That will be all, ladies and gentlemen. Good luck. The room was silent until Ostino spoke up. Oh, is that you, Pasiona? You look like you have put on a lot of mileage. You look so old. It's a disguise. Whew, what should we do? I don't know yet. I was making 10,000 posts to another thread. Some enemy agents are already around, eyeing the location and dreaming of the gold. I just woke up. Okay, let's go have breakfast. Over breakfast, Pasiona and Ostino discussed some of the history of the Amber Room. Could you please pass the jelly, dear? Sure, lover dove, here it is. Where do you want it? The Amber Room, whose interior is made completely of amber and gold, was looted by the Nazis from a castle in St. Petersburg, Russia, in 1941. Although parts of the Amber Room have resurfaced, the vast majority remains missing. The Amber Room represented a joint effort of German and Russian craftsmen. German soldiers disassembled the Amber Room within 36 hours under the supervision of 2 experts. On the 14th of October 1941, Rittmeister Graf Solms-Laubach commanded the evacuation of 27 crates to Königsberg in East Prussia for storage and display in the town's castle. Do you want that bacon, honey? No, you can have it if I can have a bite of your sausage. Orders by Hitler given on the 21st of January 1945 and the 24th of January 1945 allowed the movement of possessions. From that day onwards, Albert Speer's administration could move culture goods of priority. Erich Koch was in charge in Königsberg. Eyewitnesses claimed that crates had been sighted at the railway station. They might have been put aboard the Wilhelm Gustloff, which left Gutenhafen, Gdynia, on January 30th and was sunk by a Soviet submarine.
The Amber Room was never seen again, though reports have occasionally surfaced stating that components of the Amber Room survived the war. Indeed, 2 elements of the room's decoration, but not the amber panels themselves, were eventually rediscovered. There have been numerous conflicting reports and theories, among them that the Amber Room was destroyed by bombing, hidden in a now-lost subterranean bunker in Königsberg, buried in mines in the Ora Mountains, or, as said, taken onto a ship or submarine which was sunk by Soviet forces in the Baltic Sea. Many different individuals and groups, including a number of different entities from the government of the Soviet Union, have mounted extensive searches for it at various times since the war without any success. At one point, in 1998, 2 separate teams, one in Germany, the other in Lithuania, announced that they had located the Amber Room. The first in a silver mine, the second buried in a lagoon. Neither produced the Amber Room. However, in 1997, one Italian stone mosaic that was part of a set of 4, which had decorated the Amber Room, did turn up in Western Germany, in the possession of the family of a soldier who had helped pack up the Amber Room. Leonid Arenstein said I was one of the last people who saw the Amber Room. A literature expert with the non-governmental Russian Culture Foundation, who was a Red Army lieutenant in charge of a rifle platoon in Königsberg in 1945. The Red Army didn't burn anything, he said. Opening the cavern to get into the chamber could be dangerous because it may contain booby traps. It will have to be secured by explosives experts and engineers. That colonel was a fake. After they loaded up their rental van, they were off. Their aliases had them on their honeymoon, and they were now headed to their next love bungalow. Pasiona was busily chatting up a storm, pointing out the local flora and fauna. At least that's what the agents following them thought. Pasiona related, "Ostino, honey, it appears we have some unwanted company. Shall we use plan A or plan B?" Ostino looked at his beloved and replied, "Smoke or scream?"
I feel it's time we got down to business, and they in unison said B.
Ostino stepped on the gas and tucked right into the next corner. It was a few moments before their tail even noticed something was amiss. Quickly they worked as a team. Jumping out of the van, they quickly popped a tire, put the working dummy droids into place, and each of them rolled out their dirt bikes, shut the van doors, and were off, being careful not to disturb the dirt. Precisely 2 minutes later, their tail came around the bend, and right on cue, the dummy droids started to argue. "Henry, I told you to take that darn corner slower. Now we are going to miss the start of our show, darn you. Jennifer, take it easy. I'll have this changed in a jiffy, providing you shut_up." The agents had a look of incredulous disbelief on their faces. Quickly, they turned the next bend and were gone. The dummy droids then got into the vehicle and, gaining speed, rode off the road into a ravine and landed with a loud explosion. Passiona and Ostino were waiting just over the ridge. They kicked the bikes into gear and headed for the Cavern of Hidden Treasures. "This is no time for romance, Austin dear. We'd better get to work." Tears arrived in Austin's and Passiona's eyes. They let them flow. The entire Ninja Empire was to be in mourning, worldwide operations stopping, as they could, for an hour of silence in respect for the 104-year-old Grandmaster West. At this time, Rascal climbed the highest peak in Nihao and spread his master's ashes to the four winds. "Rascal," recalled the master's voice, and his own response. "Rascal, old friend, you must protect eternity. You are the guardian of forever now, and you ever stand at the edge of the abyss, warding off the oblivion of evil. Where will I find you after you leave here, master? I will be with you as the wind and will flow as the water, and so you shall know me when you feel the breeze and quench your thirst in the stream."
Ostino and Top Secret were entering their third cavern. They cautiously creeped forwards. The sound of dripping water echoed throughout the cavern. There was a distinct odor inside of the cave. Passiona was trying to put her finger on the scent. It was familiar, very familiar. Aha! We are not alone in here. The scent was none other than Chanel #5. Up ahead, they saw a shimmering light. They were in their specialized camo gear, which rendered them invisible. Ostino took up the lead while Passiona happily looked at his rear. The light was becoming brighter, but it still had this shimmer to it. As they shared a look at each other, puzzlement was clearly etched on their faces. All of a sudden, coming straight at them, were a couple of barking, frothing black blurs. Quickly, a hand appeared seemingly out of nowhere, and the dogs went for it. Instead of the floating hand being torn to shreds, it opened up, and the dogs quickly gulped the delicious meaty snack off of it. The hand became invisible again. Passiona and Ostino quickly backed up a few feet as the dogs snorted and sniffed at the ground. Because of their specialized camo gear, they were invisible but not unscentable, so they had the drugged chunks of food inside their suits for moments just like this. They now had a problem. The dogs were visible and might break their cover. Up ahead, they heard cursing in German, so they slowed and split up, one on each side of the tunnel. On they went, around a corner, and to their surprise there stood a woman hauling a navy blue steel lockbox that looked heavy. Passiona and Ostino looked at each other and looked back at the woman. She was grunting while she jerked on the box. It moved only a few inches at a time. Just then she loudly cursed again. She stood up and wiped perspiration off of her face with a handkerchief. The scent of Chanel #5 filled the air. Just as she started towards them, Passiona and Ostino backed against the sides of the cavern. The mystery lady then hollered out a couple names in German. Puzzled, she called again. She went. She then turned around and came back. And just then Passiona quickly stepped over to her and pressure pointed until she collapsed. The agents carried her to the cleft they had seen and gently put her down. They went to check out the lockbox. With a simple press of a button, a laser appeared, and the lock on the box was dispatched. Slowly they lifted the lid. Inside were the dull butter-colored bars of gold. The box contained 4. They checked the stamp on the side of the gold bar and saw a bird with outstretched wings. Bingo! They had found some of what they were after. Just then, Passiona felt a cold, hard object being held against her skull. She figured Ostino must be in the same boat as her. She wondered to herself just how did they find them when they were invisible. Passiona knew that she had to act, and right now. She reached up behind her and gripped the weapon. At the same moment she stood up, and with the force of her entire being she pulled, lifted over her shoulder and flipped her assailant flat on the ground. As she stomped a little extra hard for good measure, her foot on her assailant's back as she took aim and saw no one else.
She dragged the still unconscious assailant over to the cleft where she sat him down and put a gun to his head and grinned at him while she said, You and I are going to have a little fun. First of all, who do you work for? How many of you are there? And where the hell is my partner? Passiona then noticed a dark stain growing out from his rear and said, all you have to do is talk, and I'll let you go, unharmed, okay? Okay, I work for her. Name? Francie Oppenheimer. I am the only one with her, and what partner? Just at that moment, Ostino appeared with an identically clad thug in his grip. Passiona gave a good swift kick in the ribs to the dude on the floor. Now Passiona was pissed. Apparently you seem to take me for an idiot. This friend of yours here, I'm sure he'll be more than happy to oblige me. I don't think so. This one's mine. Little shit cold-cocked me and nearly got me down. I found out where their little hideaway is. It will serve us nicely, I think, my dear. First, let's get the gold and... Wait, how much gold did you find in there? 1 box with 4 gold bullion bars. It's the Nazis' loot. The falcon is stamped on the sides. So what to do with these 3? Passiona whispered something in Ostino's ear, making him smile. The crooks were tied up, and with a phone call was made to the local police. A bar of gold bullion left between them. They were going to be out of the agent's way for quite a while to come. The agents gave a wave to their foes and quickly went back to the correct cavern. They watched the police take away the small-time gangsters and sat down and discussed their options. After the smoke cleared, they headed to a new hotel for the night, where they made many new dreams and traveled right on until morning, following the evening star into its fiery depths. Over coffee, they discussed a plan of action for the day. They figured they would start with the gold bars they had in their possession. They would be sent to the center for evaluation. Their job was to locate the rest, and once they got intel back on who the 2 goons and the mo were, they could figure it out from there, or so they hoped. Ostino, looking over his newspaper at Passiona, happened to notice something odd. He put his paper down and gently nudged Passiona under the table. As she looked at him, he looked behind her and lifted his eyebrows. Trouble had walked in, sheathed in silk and wool. Ostino made a motion with his hands on the table. Passiona understood, weapons at the ready, hidden. The couple approached. Passiona dug in her purse and thought of the oldest trick in the book. Albert, honey, I have to go to the ladies' room. Can you order me some coffee to go? As she got up, she showed Ostino what she had in her palm. Passiona got up, and as she slid out of her seat, she turned to walk and stumbled. Reaching out to steady herself, she grabbed the closest thing, the man in the wool suit, and stuck a microscopic transmitter to his coat. Oh my goodness, excuse me, sir. Passiona strode away to the ladies' room and quickly turned the other way. She waited for a couple minutes, and there Ostino came, the 2 of them taking their leave in the van.
They were on the road for a short time when they noticed their friends were on their tail. So predictable. So, honey, what mode of transportation do we have this time? We have the special gunner gliders. I've been dying to try them out. Ostino sped up. They had to get a sufficient lead in order to stop and get the gliders out. He pulled over. They quickly ran to the back doors, put the ramp down, and rolled out 2 gunners. As soon as they were strapped in, they started up the motors, and straight up they shot. Ostino gave out an exhilarated shout, with Passiona squealing in delight not far from him in the air. Their next job was to gun down their enemy. With their helmets on, Passiona shouted out, "Let me, let me!" Ostino replied, "Okay, but I get the next ones." Passiona spun her glider around and was shocked to see a missile coming straight for her. She swooped to the right and said, "Ostino, missile alert, let's get the bastard." The 2 of them made short work of the enemy. They flew on, and as they were drawing near, Passiona's locator started to beep, and with that she thought, "Oh crap! Ostino, our target from the inn, is still kicking and apparently at our location ahead of us. How did he do that? Magic? No. They are twins? Negatory. Triplets? No siree. Helicopter? Nope. I give up." As they finished up their breakfast, the 2 agents were hunkered over the table, whispering when the shaking started. Passiona's face was a mask of shock and horror, while Ostino quickly whisked her up and towards the doorway. Through the screams and debris dropping around him, Ostino dodged left and right, Passiona right behind him. They burst out the doorway and ran to the van. As Ostino took the wheel, Passiona began to get their gear out from the hidden compartments. As she strapped on the belt, she loaded weapons for them both and equipped Ostino's belt while they were on the fly. The shaking seemed to have stopped, but now their main concern was that of collapsed caverns. Ostino pointed out the window at a house on the hillside, broken in half and squashed as if a big hand had just hit it like a gavel hitting its mark. They pulled off of the main road and drove up the hillside, as far as the vehicle would take them. Coming to a stop, the two of them put on the rest of their gear and went to the back of the van. Passiona pulled out the ramps and locked them into place as Ostino backed out first, one, then two of the giant mosquito-looking machines. Passiona pulled a long zippered bag out of the van, and they each proceeded to lock their ultralight blades into place. They quickly went over their plan of attack. If needed, they were hoping that this lucky turn of events was going to work in their favor. They mounted and started up. After a pre-flight check, they were off. The advantage was going to be short-lived, so they had to reach their destination as quickly as possible. They were in the air, looking a lot like prehistoric mosquitoes with some firepower. They had all of the usual gadgets, plus a few that were brand new. Ostino told Passiona that they were reaching the caverns, but they were going somewhere different this time. As they flew over the site of their last shenanigans, they took note of the enemy. There was one truck and two automobiles. They flew on.
There we are, my dear, the mansion of the Baron Manchuzin. I think we should go down before we get noticed. Ostino, I have the geotransducer, it'll pick up any entrances that could be hidden. We are going in through the bowels, and I do hope we don't have to smell anything. Sharing a laugh, they stashed their bugs in the bushes. They heard the first of the barking mutts coming at them. They decided to use the stun ray. As they waited, they heard a chopper start up, and then came the dogs. Ostino pointed the ray and squeezed the trigger. Down went #1 and then #2. While Ostino had been dealing with the dogs, Passiona was searching for the underground tunnel with the geo gun. She picked up a reading that showed an opening, but strangely enough, it wasn't there. She then realized why. Ostino, over here. As they both were looking at what she had found, they heard the chopper getting closer. With no time to spare, they quickly moved the manhole cover aside, and flash helmets donned, down they started. Ostino pulled the manhole cover and a clump of sod with it over to the opening, and thunk! It was back in place. It was then that they heard the chopper. Still, through steel, Ostino poked Passiona's arm and motioned down. As they looked, they saw blades going around faster and faster. She looked at Ostino with fright in her eyes. Survival, thought Passiona. We can do this. She quickly reached for Ostino's stun ray and coupled it with her pulse weapon. Then she motioned Ostino to plug his ears. She pointed, jammed a pebble into the trigger to make it stick, and quickly plugged her own ears. As they watched, it seemed the blades were slowing down. But no, they were speeding up. They looked at each other. Passiona had tears in her eyes. The blades were going faster and faster, and then they smelled something burning, like wiring. Yes, they were going to be all right, it seemed. Maybe we should retire to Tahiti again, dear. Do we need this gold? This is really getting dangerous for our health. Bora Bora. Darling, that sounds absolutely delightful. I can hardly wait until I feel the sand slip betwixt my lower digits. And, come nighttime, I think we shall have our own slice of paradise, feeling the warm breeze ruffle the hairs on our body as we feel our passions soar above and beyond, our heartbeats beating as one with each other and with the universe itself. Love is a beautiful thing. When people fall in love, it is not planned that way. It sort of creeps up on you and sidles in on your heart and soul. For people to question it is only natural. They must wonder what, how. I found myself one day while I was meeting and talking with Ostino. I literally found myself when I found Austin. I felt and feel whole. It shocks some people, while others embrace the love and capture a little slice of heaven within themselves. This, everybody, is love, and is nothing to be ashamed of, or to laugh at, or to scoff at. For those that do or have, that's okay too. I really don't care what others might scoff about. To me, that is a serious waste of time, and I have more important things to do, like love my Ostino.
As the burning smell started to dissipate, the fan blades began to slow down. Ostino led Passiona toward the now halted blades that had almost made chop suey out of them. They stepped through the blades cautiously. Up ahead in the distance was a shimmering light. Passiona spoke up. Ostino, what do you think that is? I don't know, darling, why don't we sneak up further? The two headed slowly upwards. As they got closer to the shimmering light, they heard voices as well. The agents shared a look, both knowing that stealth was now key to their success. Closer still, Ostino put his hand up and signaled stop. They both realized they were looking through some kind of grating. The shimmering light was a disco ball slowly twirling around and sending the bouncing reflections of light through the grating. It appeared that there was a party in full swing at the Barrens. They stepped back a few paces. "I guess we are in the air conditioning tunnel," says Passiona. Ostino agrees and adds that it most likely was as well an emergency escape tunnel. Passiona says, "Ostino dear, don't you think they are going to realize their air conditioning is down? I think we should hurry and find our way out of here." Ostino agrees, and the two agents head on into a labyrinth of tunnels. To make sure of their own escape route, they had marked the walls with a special ink that was visible only to them with their night vision goggles. She signaled to Ostino to come hither. He. She was pointing through another grating, and well, I'll be a monkey's uncle. There was the Baron Manchuzin himself in a very long room, which looked to be a dining hall, but now instead sat bars upon bars of butter-soft gold bullion. The Baron was looking quite pleased with himself. Ostino signaled to Passiona to follow him. They quietly discussed their plan and proceeded onwards. Ostino attached a tube of knockout gas to the outermost point of the grating. They donned their special headgear, helmets and all. She pushed the button and voila, gas was now leaking into the room. The two watched, and after the Baron was asleep, entered the room. The two agents set to work, taking pictures of all of the gold, and the stamps on the sides especially. Ostino was busy inserting homing devices into several gold bars. It was an easy task, as the gold was as soft as modeling clay, almost. The two agents heard some voices. They quickly went back into the tunnel and quietly inserted the grating into place once more, and removed the empty gas bomb and clay, and hurried back the way they'd come. They hurried onwards, past the dancing and festivities, on along until they hit the tunnel where the blades were. There was movement. Ostino jumped out and quickly and efficiently dispatched the enemy, most likely a patrol to find out why the conditioning had stopped. They climbed through the blades and out of the tunnel into the night. They were not out of the woods yet, so to speak. As Ostino quietly relayed to mission headquarters what they'd done, Passiona was putting together their flight bugs. She was just finishing with the last blade when they heard trouble arriving. Quickly they jumped aboard, fired up the engines and took to the air. They had to use evasive maneuvers to avoid getting hit by enemy fire, but they made it. Now to reach their safe house.
The Unity was rudely bumped and spilled a martini when the two dashing agents came into the hotel lobby. He welcomed them to the hotel and offered up a game of cards to pass the time. They began playing hearts, a game in which every heart taken counts a point against you, with the Queen of Spades counting 13 against. However, if one could capture all the hearts plus the Queen of Spades, one would gain 26 points, which was called shooting the moon. They each picked 3 bad cards depending on their aims and passed them to another person. The Unity lead a spade, the Jack, since hearts were not yet broken, if void in the lead suit, putting the pressure on those ending up with high spades, who perhaps could not survive several spade leads without the danger of taking the trick with the Queen, or capturing it with the Ace or the King. By leading the Jack, the Unity would probably retain the lead if the last to follow didn't safely play the Ace or King, and so then he could lead another spade, which would tell everyone that he either had no spade danger himself or had a lot of spades. Thus began the analysis of who might have the Queen, for it wouldn't be good to play the Ace or the King ahead of that person. There is a 2-card kitty, 2 cards always being left over from the deal to the 4 players, since the 2 jokers were used as the one of diamonds and the one of clubs, and so whoever took the first point, either a heart or the Queen of Spades, could trade cards into the kitty, exchanging them, improving their hand, the point cards left in the kitty still counting. All of a sudden, Passiona got up so fast she accidentally pulled the tablecloth off. Of course, everything else came with it too. She cursed a blue streak, then noticed all of the eyebrows that had shot up. Stumbling along with her shoe now caught in the trails of the tablecloth, she tries to gently free her foot. She was now red and sweating from the embarrassment. "Excuse me, people, to round out the entertainment, I thought I'd add this." With a sassy little grin, Passiona spins around and with her back facing her now captivated audience, pulls down her panties and nylons in one fell swoop and bends over. Then, peeking through between her legs at her now stunned audience, says, That's all, folks," and yoinks up her rigging and runs out of the room, laughing and crying at the same time. Passiona had attempted to win the first round of hearts by literally shooting the moon. However, this, while extremely exciting, did not exactly count for the scoring. The next trick was won by the third player with the ace of spades, perhaps not fearing the drop of the queen since she may have passed it to the right. The last to play dropped the 10. The king was still out there somewhere. She led a low club, perhaps being out of spades or having the queen herself. The card game was being played in Austin's new art gallery, which he had somehow mysteriously funded. The gang inside the art studio began to hear a subtle and eerie clinking of glass. As the sound grew louder, a strange yet familiar voice began to chant. "Warriors, come out to play! Warriors, come out to play I! Warriors, come out to play EA!"
The gallery window was crowded with curious onlookers. Every face was void of emotion. The silence was heavy and thick like syrup. Time seemed to stand still. Austin's art gallery, where the entertainment was taking place, was of course protected. Racecar had somehow hacked into the background sound system with an elaborate subliminal message embedded in the music now playing, which may have been the cause of Passiona's unusual behavior, she being very sensitive to matters intuitive. At the spontaneous outbreak of kung fu frivolity, protective UHMW shielding had been deployed automatically around all of the artwork. Furthermore, an anti-gravity effect had been built into this structure at enormous cost. And so now all those in attendance found themselves floating erratically while in playful, for the most part, combat. The Unity was clutching his cards, a slight frown on his brow as he wondered if this meant that his winning hand was all for naught. Label Wench had slipped her cards into a zipped pocket of her riding breeches and had grabbed the bottle of Shiraz from the table. Timing was excellent, as the variety she had ordered was using the latest in screw-cap technology, so the wine inside was safe, as long as she kept it away from present company. Austin, anticipating a possible attempt on his art, was wearing some kind of belt that allowed him to make compensatory adjustment for the lack of gravity. He was the only one still in a horizontal position. Meanwhile, Racecar was having a blast with the horse, Caramel, who quite understood that she was unlikely to injure Racecar in the present environment. Caramel, given to teleportation, although not time travel, unless you count the difference between time zones, had a much better understanding of many topics than her mistress. This was no problem as she looked after Label Wench on their journeys, so Racecar was leaping onto Caramel's back, whence Caramel would attempt to be a bucking bronc in freefall. Racecar would eventually fall off, mostly from laughing, and then Caramel would gently bunt her into a wall or ceiling and wriggle herself into position to catch the rebounding Racecar, whence they started all over again. Label Wench had finally found a secure niche to brace herself in and was watching all with mild amusement. She did know enough not to take the cap off the wine bottle until gravity was restored. Meanwhile, Passiona had heard all the hoots and hollers and was scoping things from beyond the range of the anti-gravity room, waiting to see if Ostino wanted her to deploy the sprinkler system or any other of their many defense mechanisms to cut short this mayhem.
Ostino was thinking that he might have to call Graham for a touch-up to the paint, but otherwise, what the hey? Everyone was having a riot, and all of the excitement might even bring in a few more visitors and prospective art dealers or clients, and perhaps even some Nazi stragglers. Another catalyst for the fun kung fu pandemonium was that Passiona, having given up shooting the moon with a long but non-runnable club suit, someone was holding back the king, gave it up, and having counted the spades, knew that only the ace was out. It wasn't in the kitty, as she had taken a heart and traded into the kitty, led the queen of spades, knowing it had been captured by some unfortunate person. Racecar much enjoyed the silent whisperings of Caramel and with focused determination dropped to the floor. She had learned much from the beautiful friend, all her friends. The train was coming. Vibrations could be felt for some time now. Racecar took one last look around, with a flip of her hand sent kisses on the wind to everyone. Fare thee well, dear friends, till we meet again, and she walked out the door. Passiona was back in her groove, and was greatly pleased to see that her newfound friends had a good time when they got together. She was especially pleased to be leading Ostino by his hand, with a coy yet come-hither look on her face, into the room of treasures, filled with gold. Therein, a period of time went by where love was shared, yet can't be written of, lest someone be embarrassed. The partying had been going strong, and so the remnants of the Nazi gold diggers had figured this to be a good time to break into the back room and retrieve their gold. The music that was playing outside for the lunar eclipse gently changed to the song 503 from the Angels and Amp Demons movie, and so now everyone knew that the back room was being raided. The Nazis grabbed the bullion bars that were in plain sight, plus the 2 from the card table, and then opened the chests with the gold signs on them. The knockout gas escaped and found them. They made it but a few feet, collapsing. The NIA agents swooped back in and carried the woozy ones away for interrogation, the raiders' golden touch having now gone numb. One knocked out Nazi managed to open an eye, but for a few seconds. It was one of the last visions he would never remember. Pasiona took out a remote and flicked a switch, turning off the art projections, which then disappeared. Then she removed the holographic disc, removing the gallery and art furniture. It all never happened. It was never there. Nothing had happened there. Nothing was as it seemed. Pasiona and Ostino retreated to their local and secret hideaway on the sea, in the south of France, performing there a study of materialism and romanticism. Everything seemed real there, they noted, but for some obvious cases of silicone fraud seen in the pool and on the beach. Their room was so unassuming that its entrance was via an unmarked door in the stairwell. The hotel had utilized the space behind the elevator next to the boiler room. Bad guys could not find them there, nor in the town filled with transients, visitors from all over the world. Same with all the workers. They came from afar to work during their summers off from college or whatever. The room even had a little hump and a downslope just inside the door, so even if any bad guys did get in, they would immediately fall down. Pasiona and Ostino were soon off to the depths of the sea of passion.